Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. Lovely to have so many of you with us so early on today. Looking forward to a really interesting session, which is a bit of a follow-up from one that we did live in Manchester last week, the week before, 2 weeks ago. But it was one which I think a lot of people who weren't able to attend were really interested in us bringing forward to the table this time around. There we are. We'll be able to say it properly. So really glad to have everyone with us today. To those who haven't met me before or who haven't engaged in the roundtable before, my name's Matt Baird. I've been running these now for 3 years. The idea behind these is to bring people together every single week to discuss a different key theme in housing. We have, I think, discussed just about everything, and then we keep getting new topics come up, which is absolutely brilliant. But our mailing list is now at nearly 900 members, which is absolutely incredible. The Spotify and YouTube channels where all the recordings go are doing really, really well as well. So thank you to everybody who's supporting us and for building it. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to Alertacall, who are helping run today's session, but who are also sponsoring the roundtable in 2024. James and I have worked together on a few projects before, and I'll pass across to him in just a moment. But their support of what we're doing with the roundtable and everything over the course of this year has been amazing. So a big thank you to them. Day to day, I'm a recruiter. So I've been recruiting for 11 years in social housing. The reason this roundtable stays free is partly thanks to sponsorship from people like Alertacall, but also through my recruitment business. So if you are looking for staff, please do reach out. It's where my passion lies and what I've been doing, as I say, for over a decade now. But I'm going to kick off today's session, which was named Supercharging Customer Services. And evidently, I think it's quite a powerful term. I think, with everything with the TSM results that came out a couple of weeks ago from all the news stories that we're getting in terms of customer satisfaction at the moment, is absolutely imperative that we keep talking about it and we find new ways to engage. Certainly Alertacall do that. But also today isn't about, as James and I will, attest to, it isn't just about Alertacall and them and their business, but this discussion was more wider than that and kind of saying, actually, how do we as a collective come together to really try and make true improvement in the social housing space regarding that customer interaction and really what customer services is all about. So on that, James, I'm going to pass over to you to introduce yourself. A bit about Alertacall and I guess the key themes from today, but also what we learned about a couple of weeks ago. So I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Matt. Now, I was just saying to Matt a minute ago, I've actually got a guy cutting a tree down only about 10 meters that way, and it's astonishingly loud here. But apparently you can't hear this tree being cut down. I can't hear myself think, but you're all fine. So hi, everyone. I'm James. So yeah, here to talk about customer services and actually talk through some of the things that we've learned over the years in working in social housing and offering services where we needed great customer services more generally. So I've been thinking about these things for a very long time, probably since I was about 18 years old, which is when I founded my first venture, which was actually one of the first internet service providers in the country. And since that time, through a number of ventures, most of the businesses we've been involved with and ventures have grown largely off the back of offering great customer service. Now, I want to make it clear that we have made, and I have made, loads of mistakes along the way. And I might share some of those mistakes with you and some of the things that we've learned. Now, just to give you some reassurance that I do know what I'm talking about a little bit in terms of the social housing sector, I actually originally invented a way to establish daily contact with older people who live on their own. And subsequently to that, have visited over 1,000 social housing properties with our own products and services, worked a lot with housing associations around the country. And I'm telling you that so I've got some insight into what happens in customers' homes and also what happens in terms of helping you folks deliver great customer services as well. Now, a core service is actually based around a touchscreen that we deploy into the homes of older and higher needs people. Actually, do you have one, Matt? Everybody look at Matt's screen. There we go. It's a touchscreen with a bunch of features on it, including messaging, repairs reporting, surveying, ASB reporting. And it's just an example, thanks, Matt, of how technology actually can be used to improve customer services. But whilst technology has a big part to play, there's so much more ground to cover. And actually, most of what we're talking about today only touches upon technology. So look, I'm just going to talk about a handful of themes. And Matt, if it's okay with you, because there's 3 or 4 things to talk through, what I might do is talk about one theme and then open up some discussion for 5 or 6 minutes. and then go back into another theme. Are you happy with that?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and then it is a discussion and not me just talking at you guys, that's all. So let's start with the most challenging aspect of customer services, but one which is the most obvious if you think about it. All customer services, great customer services, comes from getting your core product right. And for our sector, that means homes and communities that are fit for purpose. But what does that mean in practice? Well, it means continually looking at the homes you're providing, making them better, even the ones that were built 20 years ago. Why? Because you're still collecting rent for them and your customers deserve something which is up to date. So this is what I mean by getting the core product right. You know, when you buy a Spotify subscription or to some other music service, what you'll find is that gets evolved continuously with new music and new features, all for the same price point. And even for our own service, that touchscreen, we're continually building new features into it. And in some respects, you're being forced into doing that kind of stuff with CDM, damp and mold stuff at the moment, aren't you? You're being forced into responding to customer issues that are forcing you to get your products right. So why am I bringing up the blindingly obvious? Well, it might be blindingly obvious, but it's a good starting point. You only have customer services issues if you have a problem with your core products to start with. And what I'd like to suggest is that something that's quite different about the social housing space to a typical organisation or a business is, frankly, and it's a bit contentious, it's a lack of competition. You know, imagine that all your tenants, all your customers could up sticks and move somewhere else because there was competition against you. That's what most businesses have to contend with. But because there's a shortage of social housing, and obviously moving between houses is a Herculean effort, the social housing sector doesn't have this as an issue. But imagine if it did. What would you do each and every day to retain your customers if they could walk out of your properties and go somewhere else? And I think that might be a good starting point for figuring out what are the right things to be doing for your customers. What can you do to make your product better? What would happen if you could lose your customers? And do any of you in this forum, and I have no idea how many of you are here because I haven't scrolled along the top thing, do any of you approach your businesses or your work and your projects thinking that way? You know, what if we were to lose our customers? And I think that's the starting point for a conversation, imagining that you had competition. What would you do next? What's the first thing you'd go and fix? So I'm just interested in people's views about that.
Please do dive in if anyone would like to. Delhi, was that yourself raising your hand there? No. Sophie Hayward, I'll bring you in.
I'll go, yeah. So I work in supported housing. So our customer base, there is quite a lot of choice. They get quite a lot of choice compared if you think about people who are sort of on general needs housing waiting lists. However, having said that, because we are quite small, most of our constraints come from budgets, and generally we see the most dissatisfaction in our repair service. And it's always the question, what's a repair, what's an improvement? And for me, I think it's something that I want to boost is actually giving our housing officers more autonomy and more control over whether they have their own budget themselves to actually say, well, that's not technically a repair. However, I can see that would actually really improve your quality of life, or that would make you happy. So that is something that we can explore for you. So I think sometimes we work so within the remits of what's, you know, that's a repair, or this is that, or that falls under that, or that's not my job, that's a repair team, or that's their job. And we forget that actually we're all here for that end user. And there's quite often, you know, we're not talking millions and millions of pounds here. We're talking probably a couple of £100 max, but that could really make a massive impact to somebody's satisfaction, well-being, happiness, you know, and their quality of life. So I think people get really, certainly for me anyway, and previous organisations, people get too bogged down in the rules and forget that actually there's a really easy solution that would make someone so happy.
Well, Sophie, you've completely stolen my thunder about actually one of the next points I was going to talk about.
Sorry.
What you're saying is absolutely right. So I'll weave into another anecdote and then drop back out into conversation again, because actually it's great that
we'll go back to you, Yasmin. I'll bring you back in a minute. But James, do carry on.
Yeah, well, I'll weave into that, and then we can drop back into the conversation for a longer period, because I think what Sophie's saying, she's hitting the nail on the head. So I live in the Lake District, and a decade ago was involved in inventing something for the kitchen. Think, what on earth has this got to do with social housing? Well, up here in the Lake District, we have a great company called Lakeland Kitchenware, the home of innovative kitchenware. So some of you will have bought some stuff from Lakeland, and we took our invention to Lakeland and got it to market. And I got friends with the Lakeland owners. And I was chatting to the Lakeland owners about what was the single most powerful thing that they did to transform their business, and what took them from an everyday retailer to one of the best in the country with the best customer service. And Sophie, exactly what you said, they acknowledged actually that they had an awful lot of customer services work to get to every day. If you have thousands or tens of thousands of customers, even if what you're doing is okay, you're going to get lots of contact and calls with them. But they were drowning in it. And they came up with the bright idea of just simply empowering their team members in a way that they hadn't ever done before, and essentially said to their team members, look, if this was a family member of yours or you at the other end of the phone, what would you actually want to happen right now, which is reasonable? And whatever that is, just go and do it for our customers. And that one single decision that Lakeland made transformed them into a multi-award winning, provider of innovative kitchenware that won loads of customer services awards. And the key thing they realized was that spending the money on the small things that the customers wanted was actually cheaper than continually dealing with the contact with the customers. Right. So I think that empowerment that you're talking about is really important. I'll shut up for a second, let other people.
No. Yasmin, I'm going to bring you in and then I'll go to Jim. But Yasmin, over to you first. If you're still with us. Maybe not. Jim, do come in. I'll come back to Yasmin in a moment.
Hi, good morning, James. Well, speaking as a very satisfied customer of yours, receiving the OK each day service, I can vouch for customer care on that basis and quality of it. But in my own instance, after having worked over nearly 30 years as an auxiliary nurse, support worker, and alongside that, sales and marketing, I can say that I took the same stance as your previous Lakeland colleagues and decided that if I was going to be a good care worker, I needed to treat everybody how I'd like to be treated. So if it's somebody who had dementia, elderly, mentally ill, I did 8 years with the Jewish Blind Society, so they've been in the war camps and things like that, concentration camps, or his children had been there. But I figured if I treat them the way I'd like to be treated, and most importantly, use your nose. If you can see somebody's disgruntled, you use your nose first and foremost. So listening to them as a customer, if you care to put it that way, and looking at their needs and their requirements is exactly as you say, treat people how you'd like to be treated yourself. And I followed that over into the sales and marketing, as a problem solver and not, a profit promoter in that regard.
So, yeah, James, we have a saying here, which I'm very happy for anybody else to adopt, and I think it's what you're saying, which is doing the right thing by your customer is always doing the right thing by your business. Those two things are the same thing. They're not. There's no difference between them. But I do think that some housing providers, and look, by the very definition, we've got housing providers on a forum discussing this. Probably you lot represent the people who kind of care about the sector and doing it right the most, you as individuals or maybe your organisations. But one of the comments that was made on a post that Matt did about this event from a guy called Tom was, supercharge your customer services. What about just getting the basics right first? That would be a good starting point. And he was absolutely right, that poster. The problem is there's lots of organisations out there who still don't know even what don't really know what basic customer services is like, you know, and that, you know, it's a bit of a problem.
Certainly is. I've got Yasmin back off mute, so I'm going to bring her back in, and then a couple of points in the chat I want to raise. But Yasmin, do come in.
Yeah, sure. I really wanted to react to James and Sophie's points that they made earlier. James, absolutely loved the intro. You definitely gave me some food for thought, especially when you said about do we get worried that our customers will go somewhere else. The way social housing is now structured is very, very different to when I joined 17 years ago. So I think there is an element of competition insofar as new builds, things like that are concerned. But rather than rather than the competition element being a concern, what concerns me the most is, because I've done a lot of work around repairs and complaints. The complaints is what concerns me the most. How can I ensure that this customer will be satisfied and they're not going to make a complaint? Because I think that this is something that it's been made really, really big lately. In fact, it's become panoramic now to all organizations. But everybody needs to start thinking about complaints and customer services being hand in hand, and your complaints is no longer a back office function. You need to bring it out into the front. Everyone needs to take responsibility for it. And Sophie, absolutely loved what you said about, you know, empowering like other people in the business to like maybe make decisions about repairs. But sadly, I don't know if there's any high-end directors here that deal with budgets and things. I think they're the ones that really need to be changing their mindset. Yeah, making customers happy. Sometimes it doesn't involve thousands of pounds. You are absolutely right, Sophie. But when you've got like a remit of about, I don't know, maybe you've got about 1,000 customers that are all asking for something extra. When you do the maths, you know, that could add up into millions. And at the end of the day, sadly, I don't like saying this because I'm really passionate about customer services in housing. I don't like saying it, but lately I do think that it's become a money game. Making customers happy, very much a money game.
Really interesting you say it, because I brought this up on the roundtable before. I have recruited more in complaints in the last 8 months than I've ever done in the previous 11 years.
Matt, my phone doesn't stop ringing.
We are,
because I've
so
been a
the
complaints
sector is
manager.
desperate for people. Like I've set up full complaints teams. I've recruited managers and staff that have grown and grown because people are then deep diving and realizing the volume. And I couldn't agree with you more, Yasmin. Steve, I'm going to bring you in, then I'm going to go back to James.
Morning, James. Morning, Matt. I was at the round table in person a couple of weeks ago. Just a couple of points. For a start, I think there's too much reliance on electronic communications these days. The personal touch has been lost. Secondly, just taking up Yasmin's point, do what get things right first time. The problem is there is nobody within the organizations that actually take ownership. The customer services departments now are located in one area, and if their organization covers a large area, it's hit and miss as to whether you talk to the same person twice. Now, you know, you've got to start taking ownership. So if somebody phones in with a problem or a question or whatever, one person in the organization should take it from cradle to grave, not have that customer talk, or tenant, TRC, I call them, tenants, residents and customers, not have that TRC talk to 2, 3 or 4 different people in the organization about the same issue. I mentioned at the round table a couple of weeks ago, I had an issue over changing energy provider. My old energy provider took over 100 days to sort it out, 35 emails. And going back to Yasmin's point about asking the customer what they want, I was asked that 4 times by 4 different people. Each time I gave them the same answer and it still wasn't resolved. So you've got to have somebody in the organization take ownership of the issue.
Couldn't agree more, Steve. Jim, I'm going to come back to you. A couple of points that came in the chat was communication within the social housing sector is the first and most important thing. Rachel's arguing as well, we need to improve void standards. Joe says there's always a human being behind every interaction. It's always about people. And in a few organizations she's worked for, We've introduced small budgets for housing officers, 4K each. It's making a massive, massive difference. Claude has mentioned the residents knowing their rights is so important. And Joe has said, I take that one step further, you know, treat people like they'd like to be treated. Natasha, I think it starts by co-creating a customer charter with residents, staff and key holders. And Clara said, I agree, but I also think complaints are an opportunity to change someone's mind about your organisation. Handling a complaint well can mean someone has even more confidence in you than when they started. And that's been backed up by Joe, who's said, couldn't agree more. Seeing an increase in complaints is an opportunity to get this right. There are more points that have come up in the chat, but James, I'm going to go back to James Batchelor. I'm going to go back to yourself first, just in terms of, I know there are a few points you wanted to raise before we go to Jim and then we go to Natasha. I'm going to go to you just to kind of thoughts on that so far, and also obviously your next point as well.
Well, I think Yasmin, just to go back to a point that you were making, you're absolutely right. So there is a little bit more competition in the social housing space between different kinds of tenures of accommodation, and like you say, even in some areas between providers. But I think the point I was trying to make was, imagine that there's competition. What would you do? You know, what would you have to do for your customers to retain them? Stephen, you made a great point then about electronic communications, and it'll lead me into another bit to add into this, which is actually getting your technology and electronic communications right can actually improve face-to-face contact, can actually put you in situations where the customers that need the most support actually do get that, get more face-to-face time. I'll try and give that a bit of an example actually in a minute. And also, Stephen, that thing that you mentioned with your energy provider being passed from pillar to post, because you know, passed from pillar to post because no one individual could answer your question. I think that's a fair comment, and it would be good if customer services channels were more able to allow a single individual to service a case. But again, what can help there is the right technology. Being passed round between people isn't too bad if housing providers have competently trained people and the right system. So about 25 years ago, I was involved with a medical recruitment agency, and there was probably 100 other medical recruitment agencies around at that time. This is finding work for doctors within the NHS. But we had an ace up our sleeve, and that was that we knew how to use technology to create the best possible product. So NHS trusts needed doctors, doctors needed work, and it's a race against all the other organisations to match the right doctors to the right positions within the NHS. And lots of organisations, what they used to do was rely on fragmented systems, lots of individual bits of software, or no software at all, and try and do that matching manually. And we were one of the first organisations to bite the bullet and spend a lot of time and energy building a proper system to manage all that. And what I'm aware of today is that lots of housing providers are running dozens and dozens of different bits of software to manage their business behind the scenes, instead of consolidating that software into a smaller number of packages. So if you get your back-end housing management systems right, your customer relationship management, that can absolutely work wonders for your customer services offering. Why? Well, what happened in our case? It meant that whenever we had contact with one of our customers, a doctor or a hospital, we knew exactly who they were when they called. We knew exactly what their background was. We knew exactly what the last conversation we had with them was. And we made that visible across every single member of our workforce. So if anybody picked up a call or a query from a customer, they were properly clued in. And lots of housing providers are actually struggling to update their systems in that respect. And it hasn't been a priority for technology teams and housing teams. So that's the next thing I kind of want to lob into the conversation.
And it's also, isn't it, James, about those systems talking to each other correctly, because someone could update something, but if someone else can't find it, we get issues like we've had at Peabody and other places over the years.
Exactly right. And that's why having one of our clients has spent an awful lot of time and money over the past 3 years replacing 40 bits of software with one piece of software. And there is absolutely no doubt it's going to completely transform their customer services offering. They're also And this goes back to something Stephen said earlier about not losing the face-to-face touch. They've also combined that with a very, very high staff to tenant ratio as well. So that in a general needs setting, instead of having one person per 1,000 customers, 1,000 tenants, they've got one for about every 250. And a combination.
To me, that's the big one. I
Yeah,
think
it's
that's
a
the
big
big
deal.
shift we're starting to see. I'm going to bring in Jim and then Natasha, but to me, I can't agree with you more, James. Getting both of those bits right is absolutely imperative. Jim,
Yeah.
I'm going to bring you in, then I'm going to Natasha.
Okay, hi once again. I used to work for BT in the call centre, and I worked in Centre 6, which was the best call centre for advisors in Warrington at the call centre. And we used to specialise in sales and marketing, you know, flogging the BT together and surf together. And we were selected as a team, as a Fox Pops group for BT to give any ideas. My idea to BT was very simple, which is when you get your new customers and looking for new customers, don't start saying what great offers you're going to give them an opportunity to join you. Say we're giving these offers to our existing customers and our bread and butter customers, which they took on. And you may well remember the big ad campaign that BT did at the time. Secondly, is flagging off on calls and signing off on calls properly. I also suggested that considering BT had such a great amount of BAME advisors and Asian advisors and things, that if a caller called in with English as a second language, maybe they could flag that call to the advisor and they could speak to that person immediately, so they would get the satisfaction and quality of call and outcome of call that they required. And that's what they did. Don't know whether they still do it, but that was what they did. On another occasion, I was speaking to a doctor, and he was telling me how dissatisfied he was. It was in the days of three-way ringing. You remember all the things you could get put on your phone by BT as you spoke? So you used to get young kids coming that used to go to university. They just click things onto people's phones on the phone bill while they were talking to them and get paid like £5 commission and things on different items, you know. So with that one, I took the trouble to listen to what he had to say. The call lasted about 20 minutes and my advisor manager was listening in and he was like, you know, tapping his watch and looking at the time. And I went, you know, anyway, the outcome was this guy had got a son who'd been using the phone without permission, running up his phone bill. But this guy was a doctor who had his own practice with his own telephone exchanges alongside, you know, to run the practice. And he was just about to move from BT and look for another provider until I managed to take all these products off his phone for him and take the trouble to listen to his call and his problems and resolve it. And he stayed. That was used as a training call for BT, by the way.
Thank you.
How to handle customer service.
Thank you very much, Jim. Natasha, I'm going to bring you in.
Hiya. I think everyone's raising some really important solutions here, you know, whether it be systems or budgets. In my opinion, I think across the sector, we can't deny that there's a huge issue with customer service and complaints. And I think for me, it all starts with trust. It's such an important commodity, and I think it's a non-negotiable requirement. And without it, our communities and our organisations can crumble. And I think we have to rebuild that trust, given across what's gone on in the sector with Grenville, damp and mould case, with lots of different issues that's been going on. And so I think customer service really links back to that trust right now, whether that be going back to basics and getting back to people when you say you will, whether that's co-creating that customer charter, whether that's training in terms of the importance of the customer voice, you know, really listening and valuing our customers, especially with lots of stigmatization in the sector, and really looking at what can go wrong when we don't listen to our customers. As well as, of course, the values, you know, making sure that staff across organisations really live up to the values, because they obviously set the ethical and operational standards. So I think everyone's raising some really important points, but I do think it all goes back to trust. And I think at the moment, we all have to rebuild that trust with customers. And that takes place through listening to our customers and really putting their needs at the heart of the service.
Natasha, I couldn't agree more. And
100%.
you hit upon something I was about to come on to talk to. So which is, how do you build trust? And you actually said it when you were talking there, Natasha. You do what you say you were going to do with your customers. I mean, it's really no more complicated than that. So, you know, I mentioned one of my ventures from years ago, and we thrive by putting the right systems in place. So we had a holistic view of the customer and knew we could communicate with them properly. Well, we had a second trick up our sleeves too. And it was so powerful, it actually set us apart from all the competition. And it was simply that when we said to somebody we were going to call them back at a particular time, we always did. When we said we were going to do something, you know, send a letter or come out and do something, we always did it. And here's the thing, if something that cropped up that delayed one of those promises, we always confronted it head on and dealt with the situation proactively with our customers. And that built a culture internally of doing what's right by the customers. And our customers, even when we slipped up then, began to trust us that we would put it right. And here's the thing, doing what you say you're going to do and then doing it is something that has to be inducted into team members as part of one of your values. So one of our company values, it's a really boring one. It's actually being reliable, and being reliable is the same thing as developing trust with your customers. But
I think it's really interesting as well what Natasha said there that I was going to raise. The word I immediately wrote down was, or the two words was housing arrogance. Kind of a case of I think there is a problem within social housing where, because as it goes back to your point earlier, James, of not having competition, of not having kind of, well, look, we are providing them a home, they should be grateful kind of mindset that unfortunately carries through. That trust, it's almost like we feel that the customers, and by we I mean social housing providers, we have earned trust because we've given someone a home, and therefore that trust is almost unbreakable. Whereas, you know, somebody mentioned in the chat, and I'll come to points I'm going to go to Mia in a second, then back to the chat, but one of the points that got raised was around, you know, invisible customers or customers who don't engage or whatever it will be. Very rarely does that conversation get raised around the fact of, well, have we earned the right for them to actually reach out to us when we ask them questions and things like that? Or do they just not care about us anymore because we haven't delivered a good service? And it's on us to improve that, not on a customer to suddenly go, well, they owe us nothing just because we're providing a home. Mia, I'm going to bring you in and then I'll go back to the chat and to James. So Mia, good to have you with us. This episode of the Social Housing Roundtable is sponsored by Alertacall. Alertacall helps as many people as possible feel safe, connected and informed by combining ingenious technology and award-winning human contact. Alertacall's digital engagement solution helps social landlords proactively know their customers and properties by putting a portable touchscreen in every home, offering a daily property check through the optional OK Each Day service, plus repairs reporting, tenant surveys and much more. They also provide Beyond Warden Calls, an easier, simpler and lower cost wireless warden call solution with video door entry, dispersed telecare and smoke alarms. Alertacall works with over 60 housing providers across the UK to enhance two-way engagement between customers and landlords. In 2022, Alertacall won the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation, and in 2023 won Housing Supplier of the Year. I'm delighted to have them as our sponsor of the Social Housing Roundtable throughout 2024.
Hi everybody, apologies about my video, it is a bit speckly, but my name's Mia. I work for a company called Energy Angel, so we deal with a lot of void management for social housing around the UK. I think one of the big things that we see is we understand that customer service is everybody's role, but I don't think a lot of organisations know how to deal with individuals who have never dealt with complaints or handling. And it's the education process and making sure that the people who complaints are raised to have that skill set as well. I know it's everyone's job, but at the same time, dealing with somebody who could potentially be irate, upset, or complaining to you because you might not have done something, it's making sure that we equip those individuals with dealing with those complaints. Passing a message on to the correct department's absolutely fine if it's the correct department, but the educational side and appreciating different abilities within an organisation as well. I think that's quite a key thing. I think organisations expect everyone to know how to deal with a complaint, and it's not necessarily the case.
Couldn't agree more. There isn't enough training. Too often we kind of take it for granted that people have been trained on this stuff. I'm delighted to have seen Joe Leckie actually kicking off the wrong word, raising points sometimes in the chat, because I know this is her bread and butter and what she loves talking about, but it's someone who I've worked with for years for exactly that reason, which is it should never be taken as a given. And Mia, I couldn't agree more that people know how to deal with customers and people know how to deal with complaints, because we do. And if I go through the chat, you know, we've had a point there. So Joe had mentioned, Joe Lum, couldn't agree more with what Steve said earlier. A return to centralized HMS would be so beneficial, managed by patch or one person contact for each resident to enable consistency in the process. Claire Blacker said the word customer is a big no at the moment because tenants don't have the choice a traditional customer does. However, I wonder if, based on James's theory, it might be more healthy to talk about people as customers, as it would encourage us to treat them as they do. I remember doing a poll on this about a year ago. Is it customers, tenants, residents? And I know Steve made light of it earlier. It's so split as a viewpoint. What it is whether or not we're just treating people right, regardless of what we're calling people. And it's still something I think we're struggling with a bit. Vicky had mentioned a person taking responsibility for a complaint is so important, nothing worth being pushed pillar to post, which ties into James's point. If you actually have, if everyone knows the data, you're just moving through the process. Yasmin has said we have a way to go to change the mindset and attitude towards complaints. And Lauren, improving our residents' digital skills allows us to prioritize our resource to residents who need more support. Self-serve options are key, but upskilling residents to be more confident is the pinch point to allow us to do more for those who need it. Rita had asked, does anyone have examples of how they're offering a personal touch? And there's some brilliant ideas in the chat. David has mentioned commencing a monthly overview of resident contact and scoping residents who have no contact with us. Lauren has said removing potential silent customers is key. Identifying and supporting is crucial to how we use data to drive. Joe Lecky, trust is the foundation of all relationships, and I'd back that up by saying if housing provided for small businesses, they'd all go out of business. Steve, I'm going to bring you in, then I'm going to go back to James to provide some insight into the thoughts we've had so far, but back to you.
Yeah, just a couple of points. What was said, I think, by Mia earlier, she used the word listen to customers. I think that is key, because don't just hear them, listen to them, understand what they want. But I think a lot of organizations rely too much on the stats of how long it takes to answer a call if somebody comes in. I mean, I saw a story the other day about not a housing association, but it was some organization. They had dropped down in customer services stats because the length of time it takes to answer a call had gone up drastically. And they had dropped down from top position down to about 12th or 13th. Now, to me, that means that either they haven't got enough staff to answer the phone, or they are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is listening to the customer, finding out exactly what the problem is, and trying to work out how to deal with it. And not just say, I'm sorry, I've got to go because my stats are down. I've got to answer the next call. The other thing is coming back to what James Batchelor was saying. This shows that there must be an increase in the number of staff to monitor the customers. Because you can't just say, oh, it's all electronic now. We want you to email in or go through our website, etc., etc. There are a lot of customers who are uncomfortable with doing that because they're not always given the opportunity to fully explain the issue. It may be a load of, if you want to report a repair, it may just be tick boxes. What is it? Where is it? What's the problem? This, and this. Tick it. And then the bloke turns up, do the repair, and it's not right because the customer hasn't been able to fully explain it. The other thing is, going back to something that was just mentioned, is last year there was an award ceremony, and I was fortunate enough to be asked to be a judge, and it was around customer communication. And there was one organization which I thought was done a damn good job. It was, what they done is they went through their customer base and they targeted those people that had not had any contact with them for the last 2 years. And they physically sent people out to each of those tenants, to make sure they're okay, to make sure everything's fine. Was there any problems, anything like that? And one of the criteria was, what did you get out of it, the organisation? And they put down, we found out who wanted what, and we also found out how each individual customer wanted to be contacted. Now, to me, that is key. If you can't contact the TRC in the way that TRC wants to be contacted, you are going to have less chance of having a satisfied customer.
Completely agree. Steve, James Batchelor, I'm going back to you just for some insight and thoughts on what you've heard there.
Back to me, was that Matt? Sorry.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Well, I actually think Stephen makes a good point. So using technology in order to engage with your customers can be absolutely powerful, particularly if an effort has been made to think about the vulnerabilities in your customer base. But it can't replace human contact. You know, when you're using technology and digital engagement, it should be to improve the quality of the human contact that is required, not to take away contact with humans. These things to work always have to be blended. So I think in that respect, that's absolutely right. And Stephen, you mentioned earlier as well about actually listening. And that goes back to something that kind of Mia said, which was around training. So one of the things that we see a lot, so my organisation in Alertacall, we spend lots of time at sheltered and supported housing schemes, a lot. And we interact with lots and lots of housing officers, sheltered housing managers and neighbourhood coaches, whatever we want to call them in whatever setting. And by and large, those people are extremely dedicated and hardworking people who want the best for their customers. But we are flabbergasted about how little training they've received, even around how to communicate with people who have higher needs. You know, if you've got frontline staff and customer services staff, and even repair staff, they should all be trained in dementia awareness communication. They should all be trained in handling complex mental health issues and suicide awareness. They should be trained in how to speak positively to customers, to leave customers with a warm, glowy feeling, not using negative words by accident. And this stuff should just be done at induction and continually built upon through the journey of someone's life with a housing provider. And it surprises us that it doesn't happen more. And that would be a really good starting point. So it's not just the skill about how to handle the repair, the query, get it to the right person. That goes away if you've got the right system to some extent. It's how is that person trained in order that they can communicate properly. And I just wonder, you know, how many of the frontline team members of the housing providers represented here actually get proper comms training. It'd be interesting to know.
And there's also that element, isn't there? And I think this is a big thing within social housing of realising that actually some of those calls are really difficult. We are taking them really challenging calls at times, some ones that you're not going to get in a standard call centre elsewhere sometimes.
Yeah,
there's having training and support tied in around that. And I mean, Kim's put in the chat there, as someone who runs a homeless shelter and support services, we see people evicted and lose property due to non-engagement. I've always struggled to understand how that works. By delivering high quality customer service and demonstrating empathy and understanding towards those that service, gatekeeping at various different stages is an issue. We see a lot with GP practices and other things, but it is exactly this point that we just immediately go, well, they're that type of person, they're just not going to talk to us. Well, why? And actually realizing the vulnerabilities that people were supporting.
So just on that point specifically, and we're veering off customer services just a little bit, but it's in relation to that point. One of the, loneliness, right, isn't an abstract concept. Loneliness is a chronic medical condition that can be onset as a result of prolonged withdrawal and a prolonged isolation. And loneliness, when it's experienced by people, causes them to withdraw more. So your silent customers, your customers that are having no engagement with you, the ones that are difficult to speak to, are very precisely the ones that you need to provide regular contact to, right up until almost what is comfortable. So, Alertacall provides daily contact services for vulnerable and isolated people, and we're big fans and advocate that all older and higher needs people should have some form of daily contact one way or another. But the reason for it is this, that by continually reaching out to somebody who doesn't even appear to be that responsive to your reach out, you can eventually forge a connection, reduce isolation, and isolation has housing management complications. People who are isolated develop mental health problems that leads to antisocial behaviour, hoarding, a greater likelihood of an undiscovered tenant death. We owe it to ourselves to have more contact with our vulnerable customers.
And that is part of the customer service delivery, so it certainly ties in. Jim, I'm going to bring you in, and then I want to raise some points that have come into the chat, but do please come in.
Okay, with respect, James, I'm sorry, as far as I'm concerned, as an advisor, who would be an advisor in that situation, by all means, give them the understanding of who to signpost to, give them some idea of how to handle a call. But when you go into being a call advisor or something like that, you know, I feel that your primary concern is to handle a call and to get through the calls. It's important, like you say, that you should have some understanding. The main thing is, I think, as far as customer service goes, is when you do get the call, the quality and outcome of that call, that it's solved in the one place, and that you make it clear to other customers that while their call is being dealt with, it could be them whose call it is that you're dealing with. So to be patient. We in our doctor's surgery used to have a notice up say, be a patient, patient. Remember, it could be you in here. So that's the message I think needs getting across. Signposting, certainly, I couldn't agree more with you. That's most important. But when you go into a job and you choose to be a customer sales advisor or something, you don't actually expect to be doing psychiatric health and well-being and counselling, or even, you know, if you listen to the Samaritans, they will never give advice. They only ever listen to a call. They will never say to the person.
But they're not that's the point of that role. And I think it's interesting you said customer sales advisors, because I think this is something
Listening
as well. Housing isn't sales. And I think there's a piece there around actually it's having awareness. It's not being fully trained in it, but it's knowing actually, it's picking up on signs and being able to. And actually it's really interesting because, you know, Joe, like you said in the chat, everyone should challenge themselves and ask, how did I make a difference today? And Joe's back that Joe Worthington. I think the word empathy is bandied around a lot, but it's important to have it. And I can see a few of the points there have come around different training services that have come in business wide. You know, I mean, I'm a big advocate for Joe Leck in big picture training and have done for years, but you know, they said their USP is that we have both lived and operational experience. And I think it's that and understanding, because, you know, Kate Wood's put in the chat there, it becomes difficult and it's not always possible to train contractors in complex mental health, though, if you don't have a DLO. And I think this is the other side that becomes really interesting, because Vicky's put being trust can be as simple as just doing what you say you will do. And Joe said that, Joe Lucky said call length shouldn't be a measure. Tony's backed that up by saying one of the systems I put in recently has a communications engine, so you can record how every tenant would like to be contacted. But I think what's interesting when you look at not being able to train contractors in complex mental health and building trust, we need to remember we're not just one entity. You know, our customer service isn't just what we're doing, it's what our partners are doing, it's what our, even stuff like myself, you know, I am a part of, you know, I am a part of the customer service delivery for a housing provider when it comes to recruitment. If someone going through that journey and I'm not matching and I'm not actively realizing I am a part of the HR delivery model, then I'm failing that business in terms of their customer service from a recruitment side. I spoke with a candidate yesterday who said that they were doing, you know, they've been approached around a role by a business and they were 3 questions in and said, oh, by the way, have you got kids or any mental health needs? And this candidate was like, what are you on about? Like, what does that have to do with anything? So, well, we're just having some issues with some candidates. And immediately, but that business, her understanding of what that company are now like as a business has gone down, even though it wasn't them that made the call. And I think this is where we need to be very aware of the wider model we are doing when we're looking at who we're dealing with customer service delivery. And that awareness model, Jim, I would push back on. You need training in what's going on, because people.
I'm not disputing that. That's not what I'm disputing in the least. I agree with you that you need training. What I'm trying to say is the quality of the training and the extent of the training. We also need to realise how many genuine cases are slipping through the net, because now you may get people coming through who know the right responses and who know what to say, you know, because it's becoming so prevalent. Say, for instance, somebody gets into difficulties, they go and see a solicitor. It might be that solicitor will say you need social work reports. I've heard it time and time again. People, when they're in a situation where they face like that, there are pat answers that can be given, you know. So genuine situations can fall by the wayside, you know. And as I say, I think it's just important that the training given is not to the extent of being like psychiatric nurse or something like that, just an understanding of how to handle a call and where to send that call and the person to an assistant. That's all.
Thank you very much. I completely appreciate the input. James, I'm going to go back to you and bring you in.
So, okay, we've only got about 10 minutes, haven't we?
We do.
So, kind of from the top, we've talked about getting your core product right. And one way to do that is to imagine you had competition and you're going to lose your customers. We've also talked about getting your technology right. And I talked about it in the context of maybe having better housing management systems and investing as organizations in having that single view of the customer. We've talked about how do we build trust. And I think there's a general consensus here that the best way to build trust is to do what you say you're going to do and actually confront you authentically when you've not been able to do that and be proactive about that with your customers. And we've also talked about empowering your staff to make decisions. And I think you read out one of the comments, Matt, on that. Somebody on there, I'm not able to keep a glance of it because your brain is faster and more dexterous than mine, Matt. I can't talk and look at comments at the same time. But somebody mentioned that their frontline staff had been given a budget in order a few £1,000s to go and spend, which I think is brilliant and essentially at the heart of that Lakeland story that I was telling you about. I certainly know from talking to Places for People recently that their new chief executive, Greg Reed, has done a lot by the way of empowering his staff, his team members, in order just to get on and fix problems with customers. And that's great because if a big provider like Places for People is changing its culture and approach that way, hopefully that will trickle across the sector. We've talked about communication skills and training in general, that perhaps we need to take that more seriously right from the point of induction. And actually, the last thing I wanted to mention was in relation to one of the earlier comments about building trust, which is when you don't deliver, when you fail to do something when you said you were going to, there's a very, very powerful thing that you can do to help ease that with your customers. And what I'm going to say is going to sound obvious, but seriously, in a customer services context, it isn't. When you screw up, you say, I'm sorry. And when you really screw up, you say, I'm really sorry. Because these are the most powerful words that you'll ever use when dealing with your customers. They heal wounds, they create better trust and connection, yeah, they're ultra powerful. And even if you're not sure the issue that you're dealing with your customer is of your doing, you can still say, I'm sorry this is happening to you. I'm sorry that you're experiencing this. And just to be clear on this point, because this is the point I wanted to make, it has to be the word sorry, right? Not apologize or apologies, or we would like to apologize to you for the current scenario. It's actually the word sorry, which is the human word that other humans want to hear. And apologize is a corporate word that really implies, I acknowledge we may have done something wrong, but we're not emotionally affected by it. What humans want to hear is the word, I'm sorry. So if ever you start to, this is the one thing I'm going to bang the drum on. If you hear your colleagues, and you yourself might be somebody who says, I apologize, simply by switching those words out to I'm sorry, can have a profound impact upon what your customer is hearing or the person that you're working with. So that was the final point I wanted to wind up on. That gives us 5 more minutes.
It does. Joe, I'm going to bring you in. Thank you, James. Joe, I'm stunned. You're still on mute at the moment, but I'm stunned you waited this long to dive in, but it's good to have you with us. You're still on mute, Joe. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, we can't hear Joe.
Can you hear me?
Yes, got you now.
Oh, can now.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to James's point there about sorry. James,
You'll not believe the number of times on training courses, particularly around complaints and customer service training, where we say, when a customer contacts us, what they want us to do is act. And the A in act is acknowledge the issue and apologise. Okay. And I say, you should always apologise, just as you just said, almost word for word. I say you should always apologise, even if it's an empathetic response that you're giving, because at the first point of contact, you can't always be certain your organisation is at fault. And people will say to me, but if we apologise, aren't we admitting fault for the organisation? And I've been told not to apologise. Just you know, if you want to build trust with someone and earn their respect, just say sorry. And as you said, even if it's, I am so sorry this has happened to you, even
Absolutely.
if that's what you're saying, just say sorry. The word sorry. Absolutely. That's all I wanted to say, just to reinforce that point, James. It's so important. It's so important.
Language is absolutely vital. I know we've done some work on it before, and there'll probably be another point to raise at some point, but I can see through the chat, Kate Wood had mentioned about getting the tenure right. This is just going back to earlier points, but getting the tenure right stops evictions for tenants who don't engage. I think engagement is a big piece that's coming up in the chat actually around how do we engage with people who don't wish to engage. Kim Sutton said, I'm interested to know if any of you have contacts with local prescribers at local surgeries. And Joe's actually mentioned about how, that actually worked, but it took some finding to get there. Kate said, we're the oddity and supported accommodation, but it stops the demands for just moving someone along, gives us the opportunity for a tenancy at risk meeting where the tenant is listed. Again, it's that engagement piece. It's clear that's really coming through. Kim Sutton, all cases should be treated as genuine until proved otherwise. People are usually reactive to situations, and we see people in absolute crisis because of their situations. There's a lot of training that can be accessed for free, and my teams are encouraged to access it. And Lauren said, I often talk to my team about the why and how do we get one more satisfied resident or customer. In a sector where we have a number of conflicting priorities and challenging budget constraints, we need to ensure we remind ourselves of our purpose, our role, and the why we do it. Far more things coming through, which is absolutely brilliant. Lara's just said there, most people understand the difference between the individual in the call centre saying sorry and the machinations of large organisations when things go wrong. And I couldn't agree more. I know when I say, apologise if you feel that way, immediately I'm like, this ain't on me, this is on you. And it's the way that thing goes. But if you say sorry, it genuinely makes a difference. James, we've got about 1 minute left. Is there anything you'd like to end with today as a wrap up, and how can people follow up with you if they'd like to follow on the conversation?
Yeah, so I just think if anybody wants to continue this conversation with me directly over a coffee, over a phone call, over a video call, very, very happy to do that. Alertacall is a venture that we've had for 20 years supporting people in the social housing space have better contact with customers. So this is an area that we're passionate about and interested in. I'm available on LinkedIn. I am simply James Batchelor. I have my own website outside of Alertacall at jamesbatchelor.co.uk. That's Batchelor with a T, a bit like cup of soup, but no relation. And just before we wind off, not customer services related, but we've just done a post today on LinkedIn about a project that we're very excited about, which is we've just finished planting 20,000 trees up here in our spiritual home, the Lake District, one for each of our kind of main customers. And we've produced a little video about tree planting. And again, why are we doing that? Just to acknowledge that we appreciate our customers, and we want our customers to feel that there is going to be something that lives on beyond all of them. So that's what's going on in my head today. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat here, and I hope some of you have got something out of that. I've certainly enjoyed lots of the comments. We had the best part of 60 people with us today, so I certainly believe we have. But thank you, everybody. There will be another roundtable this week on Friday, a Friday special this week. We are having Julie Hayden join us, who is one of the vice presidents, people going for the vice presidency for the CIH. She hasn't joined the roundtable before, so really looking forward to her coming on, talking about partnership working in more depth. So looking forward to that, and more details on next week's will come later today. But now, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to everyone as well recently who's jumped on and rated the recordings on Spotify and YouTube. It's really, really making a difference. So thank you there. But for now, James, Alertacall, and everyone who attended, thank you very much for today. Cheers. Thank you, Matt. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.